to urothelial triangle. It's not there in the inner triangle. The membrane would have been called as urothelial membrane, but it has been called as perineal membrane. This is the only type of membrane which is actually seen in living persons. In a formalin fixed cadaver, there are a lot of fascia, membranes, etc., which are not rarely seen in living individuals. But this membrane is seen both in living and in dead. In the perineal membrane, there are two major openings in females, the urethral opening and the vaginal opening. In males, there is only one major opening, that is the urethra. Anal triangle shows the opening of the anal canal. In fact, the word anus means ring, R-I-N-G, ring, circular. And the anal opening is circular, that's why anus, and that's why anal canal. Surrounding the anal canal is the sphincters of the anal canal. Further lateral is the ischial tuberosity and sacrotuberosity. The space which is between the ischium and the anal canal correctly should have been called as ischio-anal space. Incorrectly it is called as ischio-rectal space. Whether you call it as ischio-rectal space, ischio-anal space, remember they are referring to the same space. Why ischio-rectal? Rectum is a part of large intestine which is above pelvic diaphragm. Anal canal is a part of large intestine below the pelvic diaphragm. So in the perineum there is only anal canal, there is no rectum. However, apart from anal canal, which is derived from endoderm, embryologically is called as primitive rectum. And the lower part of anal canal, which is derived from ectoderm, is called proctodium. Proctodium is a Greek word for the Latin word rectum. So anal canal, whether it is the upper half or lower half, embryologically is called as rectum. Therefore, ischio-rectal space is the embryological time. Ischio-anal space is the adult time. Let's go into a little more details about the medial wall of ischio-rectal fossa. The medial wall is formed by the anal sphincters. Anal sphincter, external anal sphincter are striated muscle. Internal anal sphincter is smooth muscle. The striated muscle has been shown with three different colors. The colors are artificially made. Otherwise, muscles are all brown in color. Just to clarify, you can see sloping from the sides above is the pelvic diaphragm. That is the cutoff point between rectum and anal canal. And below that sloping pelvic diaphragm, there are three colored muscles. The deep external sphincter, the green colored middle external sphincter, and the blue colored subcutaneous external sphincter. Deeper to all these three sphincters, you can see the circular muscle coat of large intestine has thickened here. That is the internal sphincter, which is smooth muscle. If you notice, that smooth muscle extends only to the upper part of anal canal, not to the lowermost part. So in between the blue color and the brown color region, brown color is the internal sphincter and the blue color is subcutaneous sphincter. There is a space between the two, which is called as intersphincteric groove, which is relatively avascular and described by Hilton. And that's why it's also called as the white line of Hilton. The intersphincteric groove between subcutaneous sphincter and the smooth muscle deep sphincter. What is missing here is a longitudinal muscle coat of large intestine. The circular muscle coat of large intestine has thickened to form the internal sphincter. The longitudinal muscle coat has not been shown here. It should be there between the external sphincter and the internal sphincter. This longitudinal muscle, when it reaches the subcutaneous part, it splits into multiple strands and that penetrates through the subcutaneous sphincter to be attached to the skin around the anal region. When this longitudinal muscle contracts, that puckers the skin around the anal canal. This is what cleanses the anal canal of the feces which will be attached to it. This muscle is vestigial in humans, therefore we need to use external apparatus to clean the perianal region. In animals, don't use the hands to clean the perianal region. It is the longitudinal muscle which are attached to the skin of the anal, penetrating through the subcutaneous sphincter. Subcutaneous sphincter always has a tone which keeps the anal opening closed. One strand of the longitudinal muscle is seen here. You can see the three circular structures which are the three external sphincters, the deep and superficial and subcutaneous further below. Here we are seeing the longitudinal muscle coat. It has not been shown piercing the subcutaneous sphincter, which it does, but what one strand, if you see, is traversing laterally. One strand you can see going laterally, but seems to stop here. This strand should go all the way to the ischial tuberosity. That strand is called as perianal fascia. The strand which is continuous and goes to the ischial tuberosity is called as perianal fascia, and the fat which is below that is called as perianal fat. Perianal fascia and the perianal fat. This perianal fat is a dense fat. So when the stools are large and hard, the passage of stools will be painful, because the perianal fat is a dense fat. Deeper to the perianal fat, this fat is a loose fat, and the ischiorectal fat or ischioanal fat. You can see the boundaries of the ischioanal fossa. Medially is the external sphincter, and laterally is the ischial tuberosity, but medial to ischial tuberosity is obturator internals muscle. Medial to obturator internals muscle is obturator fascia, which has been split into two to allow the passage of the pin structures, PIN, pudendal nerve, internal pudendal vessels, and nerve to obturator internals. Nerve to obturator internals is not lying in that space, because it has supplied the muscle. So here there are only two structures, and three structures, pudendal nerve and internal pudendal arteries and veins. That space where the pudendal and internal pudendal vessels lie is called as pudendal canal, described by another scientist called Alcock. And Alcock's canal, pudendal canal, containing pudendal nerve and internal pudendal vessels. That's the lateral boundary. The roof is formed by the sloping pelvic diaphragm and the fascia below pelvic diaphragm, which is called as anal fascia. The floor, we already said, is formed by perianal fascia. However, the perianal fat has been divided into some superficial perianal fat and a deeper, loosely arranged ischoanal fat. Starting from the upper part of pudendal canal and going to the upper part of the deep sphincter is the third fascia. Starting from the upper part of pudendal canal, going to the upper part of deep sphincter is the third fascia, convexity above. That fascia is called as lunate fascia. Not shown here. Both the fascia are not shown here. The perianal fascia is shown to be incomplete and lunate fascia is not shown at all. So now the perianal region has been divided into three spaces. The subcutaneous perianal fascia, dense fascia. Then in between ischoanal fat, loose fat. And a part above the lunate fascia, which is called as suprategmental space. The branch of the nerve and the artery, pudendal nerve and internal pudendal artery, which is starting from the ischio and pudendal canal and has to supply the sphincter, do not pass through the ischiorectal fat. They pass above the lunate fascia and go. So they are passing through the suprategmental space. Tegmental means the roof. So what lies above the roof, suprategmental space, and then reach the anal canal and supply the mucosa of anal canal, only the ectodermal part. That's about ischioanal fascia, fat. Ischoanal fascia shows the recesses. There is an anterior recess which you can see by the arrow which is going deeper to the translucent perineal membrane as an anterior recess. And there are lateral recesses which go under the sacrotuberous ligament. That's a lateral recess. And there is a posterior horseshoe recess which connects the two ischoanal fat with each other behind the anal canal. That's a horseshoe recess. So anterior recess going into the urogenital triangle, lateral recess going to the gluteal region, and a horseshoe recess connecting the two. Ischoanal fat is loose fat. It is also poorly supplied by blood vessels. So infection from one fascia easily spreads to the other one through the horseshoe recess. Now we go to the urogenital triangle. Abdominal fascia scarpa continues into the urogenital region with a new name, pollice fascia. Same spelling of pollice as in pollice fracture. So just a new name for the scarpa is pollice fascia. Deeper to pollice fascia is a tough membrane which we said is perineal membrane. The space which lies between the Colles fascia and perineal membrane is called as superficial perineal space. Earlier called as superficial perineal pouch. Pouch gives us a feeling that there is an enclosed space, like a purse or a pouch. But it's not enclosed at all, because that Colles fascia, which is a continuation of Scarpa's fascia, is not attached to pubic symphysis. So the space deep to Colles continues with the space deep to Scarpa into the anterior abdominal wall. So it's not a pouch at all, it's a space. In this space lies erectile tissue. Attached to the ischiopubic rami is the crus of penis or crus of clitoris. And around the vagina and forming the bulb of penis is the other erectile tissue, bulbovestibule, the bulb of penis. The bulb of penis continues into the body of penis and also forms the whole of glans penis. The crus penis stops at the glans penis. The bulb of penis, which continues in glans penis, contains the urethra within, but it is surrounded by erectile tissue. But the greater erectile tissue is the blind sac, which is formed by the crus penis continuing in the body. If you see the cross section of the penis, two crura on either side and one penile urethra surrounded by bulb of penis. In the clitoris, the urethra is missing because the urethra opens into the perineum itself. So there are only two erectile tissue, the crus clitoris, two plural of crus crura clitoris. These three structures, the two crura and the bulb, are covered by muscles, which are called as ischiocavernosus, covering the crura, and bulbospongiosum, covering the bulbovestibule or bulb of penis. In males, the bulbospongiosum are attached to each other by a raphe, bulbospongial raphe. And there is only one structure, two on one on either side fused to each other. But these are the ones which are surrounding the vagina and the urethra in females. In addition to that, there is a transverse perineal muscle, transverse perineal superficialis. So three muscles, a paired bulbospongiosum, a paired ischiocavernosus, and a paired superficial transverse perineum. Also from the inner triangle, you can see an inner sphincter coming in attached to this region, which is called as perineal body. Which sphincter of the inner canal? Not the subcutaneous, which is circular. Not the deep, which is also circular. It's a superficial one, which is getting attached to this point, which is called as perineal body. Perineal body is a region where 10 muscles are attached. We have already seen 6 here itself. No, 8. 2 bulbospongiosum, 2 superficial transverse perineum, and 2 parts of the subcutaneous inner sphincter. Not subcutaneous, the superficial inner sphincter. So 2 behind, 2 in front, 2 on the sides. In a deeper plane, if the name is superficial transverse perineal muscle, or this muscle which are running transversely, there must be a deep transverse perineal muscle. Deep transverse perineal muscle lies deeper to the perineal membrane, but attached to the perineal body. So 6 muscles lie in the superficial space, 2 muscles lie in the deeper space. And that is the deep transverse perineum. That makes it 8 muscles. And levator ani, part of pelvic diaphragm, has got some strips which is going around the rectum, which is called as tuborectalis, and some string going around the prostate, that is called as tuboprostaticus, which in female will be called as tubovaginalis. That part of tuboprostaticus or tubovaginalis will be also attached to the perineal body. Fibers from the deeper plane, which is winding around the vagina or winding around the prostate in the deeper plane, will also be attached to the perineal body. So one on either side, and makes it pelvic diaphragm, 2 muscles, one on either side, deep transverse perineum, intermediate muscle, one on either side, and 6 superficial muscles, superficial inner sphincter, bulbous spongiosum, and superficial transverse perineum. The junction of the root of penis and body of penis are supported by 2 ligaments. One which is arising from the big symphysis and one which is arising from linea. The fundiform ligament and the suspensor ligament. The suspensor ligament arising from the pubic symphysis, fundiform ligament arising from the linea alba. In females, the clitoris is surrounded only by suspensory ligament, no fundiform ligament. This is the one which we just enumerated. Here again you are seeing the 6 muscles which are in the superficial plane. You are seeing perineal, you are seeing the levator ani, but this part of levator ani which is shown here is not attached to perineal body. They are the pubococcygeus. Further medial to that is tuborectalis, and further medial to that is tuboprostaticus or vaginalis. If we call the space superficial to the perineal membrane as superficial space, automatically what lies deep to perineal membrane will be called as deep space. You can see how much tough the perineal membrane is. See the thickness and see the thinness of the fascia above. Anteriorly the perineal membrane stops short before it reaches the pubic symphysis as transverse perineal ligament. Posteriorly it is the thick ligament joining the 2 ischial tuberosities, separating the urogenital triangle from anal triangle. Inferiorly also it's quite thick. The space below that is deep space. The space above that is superficial. Space below that is superficial space. Space above that is the deep perineal space. Again, considering this thin fascia over and the perineal membrane in front and behind and below, this appears to be an enclosed space called as deep pouch. But this fascia which is there above is seen only in formal fixed cadavers. Otherwise, the superficial fascia, which are the superior fascia, which we are seeing here, is just the epimysium of the muscles. This is the loose connectivity. Epimysium of the muscle. When injected with forward, it will appear like a space and it appears like a pouch, which is also not a pouch because there is no covering above. So it is also deep in space. Because of this appearance of that superior fascia and an inferior fascia and muscles enclosing that, it was formerly called as urogenital diaphragm. So starting from top of the body to the pelvis, there is one diaphragm, one cell length, which is separating pituitary from hypothalamus. Then there is an orocervical diaphragm, which is mylohyoid muscle. And there is a cervicothoracic diaphragm, which is Simpson's fascia. And there is a thoraco-abdominal diaphragm, the diaphragm, the respiratory diaphragm. And there is a pelvic diaphragm. But there is a pelvic diaphragm as a whole, hiatus urogenitalis. So the organs can prolapse through that. So deeper to the pelvic diaphragm that used to be described as a urogenital diaphragm. But since the muscles are covered only by epimysium of the muscle, which all muscles have, it is not a diaphragm at all. Diaphragm has to be something that is partitioning two areas. This is just a muscle lying there. So the urogenital diaphragm no longer exists. Deep perineal space does not have a superficial roof. The part of the urethra which passes through the deep space is the membranous urethra. The part of the urethra which is below the prostatic urethra is the membranous urethra. And surrounding the membranous urethra is the voluntary urethral sphincter. The renal membrane is a thick triangular facial sheet that fills the space between the arms of the pubic arch anteriorly and free posteriorly. Notice, pubic arch is not pubic symphysis. So there is a gap between the transverse sphincter ligament anteriorly with the pubic symphysis. Structure that pierce the perineal membrane in males. Posteriorly, there is posterior scrotal nerves and vessels, which will be in females will be called as posterior labial nerves and vessels. Extremely anteriorly, in that gap between pubic symphysis and the perineal membrane, three structures pass: deep dorsal vein of penis or clitoris and dorsal nerve of penis. And just behind that is the dorsal artery of penis. Remember, penis is described as if erect. So the one which is supplying the posterior part of the erect penis is dorsal. And that's what this supplies. The posterior part of the erect penis. That's why the name dorsal artery and dorsal nerve. The erectile tissue itself is supplied by deep artery. This is the artery which is going into the blind crus of penis. Blind. The crus of penis is drained by deep dorsal vein. Deep dorsal vein drains into the pelvic cavity, into the prostatic venous plexus. Prostatic venous plexus is a low pressure system of vein. In female, there is no prostatic venous plexus, so there is no low pressure system in the pelvis. The deep dorsal vein, because it drains into the low pressure prostatic venous plexus, causes the erection of the penis to disappear very fast in males. As much fast it gets erected, equally fast it drains, because the vein which is draining it is going into the low pressure system. Urethra is surrounded by the artery of the bulb, and the nerve of the bulb. And further posterior to that is the opening of duct of bulbourethral gland. Bulbourethral gland itself lies in the deep space. It pierces the perineal membrane, comes to the superficial space and opens into the urethra. That's why bulbourethral gland, opening into the bulbar part of the urethra. Corresponding glands in females are called as greater vestibular glands. Greater vestibular glands open in the space between the urethra and vagina. Greater vestibular glands itself lie in the superficial space, and it opens also in the superficial space. Therefore, greater vestibular glands ducts does not pierce the perineal membrane. So I will repeat again. Structure that pierce the perineal membrane. Posteriorly is the posterior scrotal, posterior labial nerves and vessels. Around the urethra is the artery of bulb, artery of nerve of bulb. Both in this will be called as artery of vestibule and nerve of vestibule in females. Urethra itself, in both the genders, the duct of bulbourethral glands will be piercing from deep pouch to superficial pouch. The greater vestibular glands are already in the superficial pouch, so they will not pierce the perineal membrane. Instead, in females, there is a vaginal opening. Anteriorly and midway through is the dorsal artery of penis, which is supplying the cusp of the penis clitoris. These regions are drained by deep dorsal vein of penis. In addition to that, there is a dorsal artery of penis which also drains into deep dorsal vein and dorsal nerve of penis. Deep dorsal vein and dorsal nerve of penis do not pierce the perineal membrane. They pass through the space which is lying between the perineal membrane and pubic symphysis. Deep space or pouch is a narrow region superior to perineal membrane, and it contains membranous urethra and vagina in female. Bulbourethral glands lie in the deep pouch. Corresponding greater vestibular glands do not lie in deep pouch. Deep transverse perineal muscles and the urethral sphincters. Part of it is called as compressor urethrae, and in females there is a urethrovaginal sphincter. What you are seeing here is a urethra which is surrounded by a annular sphincter which is surrounding the urethra itself. It's actually a part of the urethra, it's a wall of the urethra. But in addition to that, There is a muscle which is starting from ischial prostate, passing in front of urethra, going to the other ischial prostate. This is called as compressive urethra. And deep transverse muscle is already there, but in female there is also a sphincter which is going around the urethra and vagina, which is called as urethrovaginal sphincter. So, urethral sphincters, the voluntary one, are 2 in males, 3 in female. One is the annular sphincter, which is surrounding the urethra. That's a part of the urethra itself. On this, running from front on either side is a compressive urethra, and in female there is an additional urethrovaginal sphincter. Urethrovaginal sphincter also cited could be considered as a part of the pelvic diaphragm, a part of the pubovaginalis, but this part is not attached. Some parts of these fibers are not attached to the pubis. That's why pubovaginalis sound would be incorrect. They are just surrounding the urethra and vagina, urethrovaginal sphincter. And because there is no prostatic urethra in female, the voluntary sphincter and involuntary sphincter are mixed with each other. In contrast, the voluntary sphincter in males surrounds the membranous urethra, and the involuntary sphincter in males surrounds the part of the urethra above the prostatic urethra. The prostate clearly separates the smooth muscle and the sliding muscle, the voluntary and the involuntary. The dotted line here shows the bulbourethral gland in the deep pouch. No corresponding gland in the middle. What are all these supplied by? All these structures are supplied by pudendal nerve. Pudendal nerve, which is lying in the pudendal canal, gives a branch to the rectum, which is called as inferior rectal nerve. Correctly should have been called as inferior anal nerve. Supplies the ectodermal part of it. After it has supplied the inferior rectal, the pudendal nerve divides into 2 main branches. One is called as the dorsal nerve of penis, and the other is called as perineal nerve. Perineal nerve gives the posterior scrotal nerves and vessels. It also supplies other muscular branches to all those 6-8 muscles which are there. Pudendal nerve, whatever are the branches, there are corresponding branches of internal pudendal artery. So first there is the inferior rectal artery, vessels actually, then there is a perineal vessel which gives posterior scrotal vessels and dorsal artery vein of penis, and there are branches by artery to bulb, deep artery and all those things. This deep artery is the one which supplies erectile tissue. There is no corresponding nerve to erectile tissue. Deep artery is an additional artery which has no counterpart nerve. Otherwise, all the artery and the nerve are parallel to each other, run together with each other. What one should realize is that, see the misnomer in the name. Pudendal means external genitalia. Anal triangle is the posterior one. So urogenital triangle and anal triangle. Together these constitute perineum. So the internal pudendal artery supplies inferior rectal artery, that means supplies the anal triangle, and it also supplies the urogenital. So internal perineal artery should have been named as perineal artery, because it does not supply only the genitalia. And after giving the inferior rectal artery, the artery which continues should have been called as perineal artery. I'm getting the point. Perineal means external genitalia. So the main artery should have been called as perineal, and the two branches should have been called as inferior rectal or inferior renal and perineal. Here is the other way around. The main artery is called as internal perineal, which supplies the anal triangle. Then it continues into the urogenital triangle with the new name, perineal. But then it supplies only urogenital triangle. So, there were, what do you say, terminology also are faulty. Anyway, we are using the word pudendal nerve because there is only one nerve. But we are using the word internal pudendal vessels. That means there must be some external pudendal vessel. Where are the external pudendal vessels? This is the last class of your blood vessels for the entire body. External pudendal vessels are branches of there is a superficial external pudendal and there is a deep external pudendal. Both are branches of femoral artery. And femoral artery, this was done in the way back in December. But that does not mean it's not going to come in university exam. So there is a superficial and deep external pudendal vessel which will supply the anterior part of the scrotum. Because posterior part of scrotum, you see, we saw it supply the posterior scrotum of the vessel. Anterior part of scrotum, blood supplies external pudendal vessels, but the question still remains. External pudendal vessels, there is no external pudendal nerve. Which nerve supplies the anterior part of the scrotum? Which nerve supplies the anterior part of the scrotum? I leave it for you to find out. Instead of just telling you, so that you, some homework should be there. What you are going to search for. If you get the answer, you can share it in the group, so the others also get educated. To end the class, we will talk about the urethral sphincter mechanism. Urethral sphincter mechanism consists of intrinsic striated and smooth muscle of the urethra. Remember, the word intrinsic, striated and smooth, because they belong to the urethra itself. And urethral is component of urethra, which is also striated. This holds true for both the genders. Fibers, the lowest part of the neck of the bladder, acts as internal urethral sphincter. Just to not to confuse with the external sphincter. External sphincter is given the name sphincter urethrae. Internal sphincter is called as sphincter ossificale. It is a part of the bladder neck. And that is also both in male and female. Some striated muscles surrounding the membranous urethra in males are attached to the inner surface of ischemic ramus. This we said is also called as compressor urethra. Those that not belonging to the urethra just compresses the urethra. So this is the annular sphincter. So we start from ischemic ramus and go to the other side. It's called as the compressor urethra, and those which surround the urethra and vagina, urethrovaginalis. true annular sphincter surrounds the urethra in the middle one-third. Compressed urethra muscle starts from ischiopubic ramus, passes the anterior to the lower one-third of the urethra, it squeezes the urethra from the ventral part, and the ureterovaginal sphincter begins from the ventral side of the lower part of one-third of the urethra, that is this part, constricts both the urethra and the vagina. Rupture of urethra. This radical structure which is seen here is the deep space. And as you said, the deep space has got a tough membrane below the renal membrane and just epimysium of the muscle above. So the urethra ruptures in that space, the membranous urethra. Urine will extravasate on either side of prostate into the pelvic cavity because there is no fascia covering it. So the internal and sphincter rupture in the membranous part will extravasate the urine into the pelvic cavity. But more commonly injured is the urine in the bulb. So the urine bulbar urethra is ruptured. The pollice fascia limits the pollice fascia is attached to the perineal membrane behind. So the extravasated urine can't go to the gluteal region because the pollice fascia green color is attached to the perineal membrane, which limits the urogenital space of the anal space. But the urine can safely accumulate in the scrotum. It cannot go much into the penis because the scarpa fascia becomes a box fascia in the penis, which is tightly adherent to the erectile tissue, and therefore urine can't extravasate much. But there is space in front of pubic symphysis and pollice fascia. The urine can extravasate to the anterior abdominal wall in the subscarpal plane. Scarpa fascia is attached to pectoral fascia at the visceral level. So urine can extravasate all the way up to the viscera. And on either side of the midline, it can go to the intramammary space, after which the scarpa and pectoral fascia fuses. Laterally, it is fusing with the thoracolumbar fascia, which is on the back side. Urine can extravasate all the way up to axilla, mid-axillary line. But it can't go to the back because scarpa fascia and thoracolumbar fascia fuse. The urine can extravasate into the thigh till scarpa fascia is attached to fascia lata. It is attached to fascia lata 1 inch below inguinal ligament. 1 inch below inguinal ligament, where the scarpa fascia and fascia lata of the thigh fuse with each other. That is as far how 1 inch into the thigh the urine can extravasate. That line where these two fascia fuse is called as Holden's line. So I repeat again, rupture of perineal urethra cannot go to the gluteal region because pollice fascia is attached to perineal membrane. Urine can extravasate into the scrotum in the plane deeper to diaphragms. Don't confuse this with hydrocele. Hydrocele is a collection of fluid between the two layers of tunica vaginalis. This is a collection of fluid just deeper to diaphragms, outside the external somatic fascia. Then urine tries to enter the perineal urethra, can't enter much because of the unyielding box fascia. But it is free to enter the anterior abdominal wall because scarpa is not attached to pubic symphysis. Once it enters the anterior abdominal wall, it can go up or down. Down it goes into the thigh, 1 inch below inguinal ligament, till the Holden's line. But up it can go much more. The visceral is the midline, inframammary space laterally, and anterexaline axilla, superior and posterior. It can't go to the back. It can't go to the gluteal region, it can't go to the back. That's rupture of perineum. Any question? Can we stop there?